Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. What's a time where trusting your gut quite literally saved your life? Some of these might be a little not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I almost drove through a big patch of tall grass on my dirt bike just for fun, but at the last second hit the brakes and turned around. Didn't know why. Next time I was there, turns out there's a 75-foot cliff over a river right behind it that I would have just flew off of at top speed. Because of the scenery, you couldn't tell it all looking head on to it. I still don't know what made me stop back then. I was working in the sales office at an engineering company. I was asked to record the serial numbers off a stack of large steel plates on the shop floor. I had to get someone with crane operating experience to lift the top plate so I could read the one underneath. The guy lifted it directly upwards about 6 feet. I was just about to lean underneath the plate when a little voice inside my head said, "Don't do that, mate. Get him to move the overhead plate to one side." Just as I thought that, the clamp holding the plate failed, and it fell to the ground just in front of me. It must have weighed about a ton. If it had fallen on my head, I'd have been killed instantly. My girlfriend met up with a work friend at a bar. This girl was with a guy who gave me seriously bad vibes. He was fake friendly, but his eyes were crazy. My girlfriend didn't see it. I wasn't having it. I told her I was leaving, and she really needed to come. We fought, I left, she came running after. Next morning, we found out the guy stabbed someone in the chest and killed the guy. I straight up said, "I told you so." He was effing crazy. Girlfriend's friend spent the night in holding too. I don't know if it saved my life, but it saved me one hell of a bad time. I've told this story before in another post, but on an old account. My boyfriend at the time and I were house sitting for his uncle. My boyfriend was at work and I was bathing our son before bed. I had the bathroom window facing the backyard very slightly cracked and heard a cough from outside. This house was in a residential neighborhood, so it could have been a neighbor, but I suddenly felt anxious and scared, and something told me to go make sure the back door was locked. I left my 2-year-old son alone in a towel in the bathroom and ran to the back door. As I placed my hand on the doorknob locking it, I came face to face with someone through the glass, who had his hand on the outside doorknob. He started pounding on the door and jiggling the doorknob, saying he was looking for someone, and I just told him, "No, they're not here." He kept jiggling the doorknob, and I ran to my son and grabbed my cell phone to call for help. Remember, I'm house sitting though, and this was 2004-2005, when they had those flip-open phones, not a smartphone where you can just look at a map. So I had no idea what the address was, or where the house phone was. Anyways, I call 911 from the bathroom on my cell while hearing loud pounding on the back door. The dispatchers tell me to find a house phone, piece of mail, anything with address. I locate the house phone and call 911 from that. So, have no idea how police got there so quickly, but just as I hear the back door glass break, the guy on the phone tells me to cover my son's head with a blanket and run out of the front door into the back seat of the police car. I ran out the front door and saw 6 or more police cars, all with guns drawn, and straight into the waiting cruiser. After they arrested the guy, they asked me if the machete on the back porch belonged to the owners of the house. The guy had a machete, and had I not trusted my gut that the cough sounded a little too close, and to check the back door, he would have walked right into an unlocked house to a 19-year-old female and her young son alone. Turns out, he had been robbing houses and had a backpack full of stolen things and was high on meth. Anyways, super glad, so followed my gut on that one.
Well, that's a frightening story. I'm glad everything worked out okay, but that is harrowing, so yeah, good thing you trusted your gut.
One time, I was hiking after a storm, and my intuition told me to freeze. I listened, and a large tree just fell down across the trail in front of me, right where I would have been standing if I didn't stop. Not necessarily saved my life, but saved me from getting seriously hurt. I was a temp worker at a warehouse, worst 9 months of my life. I wanted to die. One day, my boss, who had no training on the forklift, told me to climb up on a ladder and move something out of the way of the forklift. And my gut said, tell her to turn the forklift off first. So I did. She scoffed at me and said it was unnecessary. So she got this other guy to do it because I was being difficult. When she moved the fork up and smashed his fingers against the ceiling, breaking every finger on his hand besides his thumb, the badass just went, ow, and was like, about time I retire anyways, huh? He was like 70. I had a sense something was wrong in my house, but no reason why. I went around looking, but couldn't find anything wrong or anyone in there. Felt so freaked out, and I stayed at a friend's place. Ended up being a carbon monoxide leak. Could have to a local park early in the morning to walk the trails. We had just finished a long trail and were resting. I was sitting on a bench. My dog's hair stood up and he started to growl. When I looked back, I saw a man walking towards me. His eyes didn't look right. I knew he was high. When my dog growled, he stopped. He gave a smirky smile and asked if my dog would bite. I told him he definitely would if the guy came any closer. He hesitated for a moment, and then he turned and walked away. To this day, I'm certain he meant to harm me. If I hadn't trusted my dog, I hate to think what would have happened. I gave him lots of hugs and treats that day. He died many years ago, but I think of him often, and I believe that when I cross over, he will be there waiting for me. He was the best dog I ever had. I still love and miss him greatly. A couple of years ago, we had a ton of snow and a delayed spring. When the snow finally started to melt, it was very rapid, so much that some areas had little creeks forming. My dad and I were on a walk on a trail and stopped to admire a culvert that got torn apart by the newly formed river. A large tree had already fallen down onto the path because the ground had completely eroded at the base. I was looking at another tree near the riverbank and thought it was likely going to fall in a day or two. That tree's going to fall too, I bet, I told him. I watched it swaying slightly for a moment, then it stopped swaying, and I just stared at it for a couple of seconds before I went into full panic. Oh shit, run, run! We just ran without looking back while several trees all started coming down in a chain reaction. The tree I was mesmerized by stuck right where we were standing. I think my brain realized that the tree stopped swaying because it was starting to fall down. When I was 10, I was walking to my friend's house. A van stopped me to ask for directions to the park. A man was driving and a woman was passenger, and she's the one who spoke to me. We had been taught in school and by my parents that adults should never ask kids for directions. In school, they told us if anyone ever stops you, take a giant step back before running away so they can't grab you. So, I take a step back and tell them I don't know where the park is. The lady said, I can't hear you, come closer. And I knew in my gut something was wrong. Out of fear, I almost listened to her, but then the sliding door in the van started to open and I took off running faster than I've ever ran in my life. Ran all the way to my friend's house. I told her parents everything, and they called my parents and the police. The police came to her house and talked to me and said that 2 other kids in our neighborhood reported the same van, stopping and trying to talk to them. It was weird because before the van even stopped beside me, I had this sick feeling in my gut. As soon as it started rolling down the street, I knew something bad was about to happen. It was a couple of months before I had the guts to walk to my friend's house again.
You were taught well, and you did everything that you should have done. Unfortunately, in these rare instances when that happens, people forget some of those basic lessons, so be vigilant. Good mark.
I was driving home from a friend's house late one night. I was probably 16 to 17 years old and had a Mustang, so I was getting it down a back road when I heard this loud, slow down now, in my head, louder than the music I'd cranked up. I immediately slowed down to a well below the speed limit, and when I came around the next turn, there was a train coming across the unmarked tracks. There were warning signs about the tracks. I knew they were there, as I had traveled that road many times, but there were no lights or cross arms, and I'd never seen a train on those tracks before. Add that to the fact that there are woods on either side of the road, so it would be almost impossible to know if a train was coming at night. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was with a girlfriend at a club. Met some guys who said there was a party they were throwing. I was driving, so I figured I couldn't hurt to check it out. Get to a hotel room, and it's just us two girls with at least four guys. I already felt something bad would happen, but decided to drink as much of their booze before bugging out. I remember quite vividly standing at the mini fridge, and my friend was sitting on one of the two beds. She was holding one beer and talking about how drunk she was. OMG, I'm so drunk. And no sooner than she starts saying this, these guys started moving in on her like a group of hyenas going in for the kill. I immediately knew we had to GTFO. I just walked over to her and told her I needed to talk to her outside, and grabbed her by the wrist and kept walking down the stairs from the hotel door. She fought me the entire time, and I had to scream at her to get in the car. By the time the guys figured out we were leaving, they were at the door of their room throwing things at my car. I know I saved my friend from a gang-ar, and she didn't want to leave. She never thanked me. Maybe not saved my life story, but totally saved my siblings and me from bad things for sure. When I was a teen, around 15ish, maybe 16ish, Mother was dating this cool guy. To Mother, he was a catch. He was built cause he would wrestle in the Mexican lucha libre, like WWE type of wrestling. He was very friendly and charismatic. However, I never liked him. I'm the oldest sister and was parentified, so I was like the mother to my sibs. I was in charge of all their everythings. To this day, my youngest bro, who is 32, loves to tease my son by telling him that my bro is my first son and my son is my second to him. Anyway, this man just always made my skin crawl and my gut would just go crazy when he was around. I would fight with Mother constantly, cause she would get mad that I didn't comply, and I would always keep my siblings away. I would make sure to be mean and annoying and just be a complete asshole to him and Mom when he was around. He left her after a few months and she blamed me for it. A few months later, his picture was in the local news. He was arrested for pedophilia and child trafficking. I remember yelling at Mother and pointing my finger at her and telling her I knew it. He was a bad man. You didn't believe me. Thanks to me, my siblings weren't the next victims. Who knows, but a couple weeks into recovering from a fractured hip, I noticed my calf or foot turning red when standing up. A day or so later, it felt like a minor muscle cramp in my calf, and my foot maybe a little clammy. My mom said I was overthinking it. I knew something was wrong and went to the ER. Anyway, where I was diagnosed with a DVT, then 5 days later, had a pulmonary embolism. Had I not gotten it checked out as quick as I did, the clot could have continued to grow, which would only increase its potential danger. Thankfully, the clot was small, and damage minimal, all things considered. I realized in my 39th week of pregnancy that my baby hadn't been moving as much for the past 36 hours. I decided it was best to make sure everything was all right, so we went to the ER. Turns out I was having preeclampsia and had the umbilical cord around his neck and was swimming in meconium. They put me on magnesium sulfate to bring my blood pressure down, and they gave me an emergency C-section. I and my son needed a few days to recover, but we're alive and well now. If I'd decided to keep waiting and seeing, both of us might be dead. I was at a party off campus with a very effing annoying friend of my then girlfriend, now my wife. We were waiting for my girlfriend and another of her friends to show up. The guys hosting the party were sketchy looking, and I had a drink a beer and jet out vibe. I was talking to someone I knew from class, and I turned around and saw my wife's friend, who was sober 10 minutes ago, stumbling and slurring with some dude, was walking her to the basement. I ran over, told him to get the F off my girlfriend, and suddenly I was surrounded by 3 guys telling me to F off, and they were all partying downstairs. The guy who I was talking to walked over with some of his friends, and I took the opportunity to get the hell out of the party. and called my girlfriend and told her not to go. We met up at the local Waffle House, and we fed her friend, gave her coffee, and got her to her room. I later found out another girl wasn't as lucky. The guys held her in the basement for 3 days, and she was repeatedly yarded. The guys didn't do a day in prison because the girl left town and never came back as soon as she could and refused to testify. I always felt guilty about it, although I still don't know what I could have done differently. When I was 8 years old, we had a special quiz in school. It was worth a small amount of our grade, but the rule was that we only got the points if we took it home, showed our parents, had them sign it, and return it the next day. This was the 80s, and I'm now 99% sure it was to ding my grades in class because I aced everything but had wicked ADHD. Anyway, we lived a 40-minute drive from school because America, and about halfway there I started having a panic attack and I didn't know why. We were between these two semi-trucks, a gasoline tanker and a cement truck. My mom pulled over so we could talk it out, and then I remembered my quiz. We were going to be there early, so we sped home, grabbed the quiz, and headed back to school. As we got about 2 miles past where my mom had pulled off the road to talk to me, we saw that the cement truck had rear-ended the gas tanker, which then exploded. The charred remains of bolt trucks, dozens of emergency vehicles of all kinds, and a huge swath of melted asphalt and burnt grass around the road told the story. Our little 1984 made subcompact would have been sandwiched right in the middle. My mom turned to me and said, "You should trust your panic attacks," which turned into a lifelong anxiety disorder, but hey, saved me once.
Well, you certainly can't deny the timing of that, so I could see how trusting that could become a lifelong problem, but at the time, it very well may have saved your lives.
I was working for an oil field company, and we were doing some maintenance on a hydraulic pump jack. I had to be lifted in a back seat or a basket about 20 feet in the air by the crane I was working on and loosen a couple of nuts so we could remove a part to lift some components. Once I got up there, I took my hard hat off because it was so hot out, and I figured, hey, what could possibly drop on my head when I'm higher up than anything around me? I loosened the first nut and then thought about how mad my mom would be. She's a nurse and never really liked me working in the oil field because of how dangerous it was. So I put my hard hat back on. When I loosened the last nut, the pump jack shot up because the operator hadn't depressurized like he said he had. This massive nut flew straight up in the air, and before I could figure out what was happening, it landed square on my hard hat. The force made me drop to my knees. The guy operating the crane saw me drop and immediately lowered the basket to the ground. I walked away with a kink in my neck and a huge dent in my hard hat. I often think about what would have happened if I hadn't put it back on. Thanks, Mom.